everyone. It's great to see so many of you here today, and welcome all of you to the GDC Substance Days from our behalf as well. And before we start, already would like to want to thank Adobe Substance for inviting us to come over here and talk about the environment, art, technology, and workflows for Alan Wake 2. We are glad to be here and hope that you all enjoy the presentation we have for you. And before going on into the actual presentation itself, let us briefly introduce ourselves first. So my name is Miro Vesterinen. I'm the head of environment art at Remedy Entertainment. I've been in the games industry for a bit over a decade now, and at the Remedy for the past 8 years. So I joined in 2016 after we had shipped Quantum Break and have worked on pretty much all of the major releases ever since. But my focus has been mainly on the Control franchise, where I was also the lead environment artist. I'm also passionate about mentoring and been doing it for multiple years already. I'm one of the class supervisors and online mentors at Think Tank Training Center, which is an educational institute in Canada. And during my free time, I like to go to sauna and swim in the icy waters of Finland, or spend time with our dog, Misha. And occasionally, I also like to enjoy a good cigar with a drink or two. So that's me.
All right. Hello, my name is Benjamin Lindqvist, or Ben Lind for short, and I'm a principal technical environment artist at Remedy, whatever that means. And so here's a bunch of links if you want to get in contact with me. And I've been working in the game industry for a bit over a decade at Remedy, almost a decade, actually this year. And yeah, here's some projects I've been working on. First one isn't actually a Remedy game, but I thought it was cool, so I included it anyway. So, and yeah, I've been involved in most of Remedy projects since Quantum Break in one form or another. And then the clicker doesn't work anymore.
Does it work?
Nope. No, it works. Awesome. So yeah, here's some personal stuff about me. So I'm married. My wife is here somewhere, and I like climbing and fixing and building stuff. And yeah, my workbench is an old ping pong table. So and yeah, also like knives. So basically, we've got all the Finnish stereotypes covered by just the two of us. And then this upcoming video is not to show how cool I am with climbing. It's more of like a, despite a lot of flailing and, okay, sound doesn't work, or does it? Yeah, okay. So yeah, it doesn't always look
nice mantle,
but you have good friends and like people that support you. So eventually managed to make it, and I kind of feel the same about game development. So anywho, so how we're going to go about this presentation is that Miro is going to talk about company overall, like a little bit of history and what we're doing now. And then I'm going to talk more about our workflows and tech. So yeah, go ahead, Miro.
So all right, so let's start with just a quick company overview and introduction. So Remedy Entertainment is a game development studio from Finland, which actually started back in '95. So we are the second oldest still standing studio in Finland. We have 2 offices, with our headquarters being in Espoo, Finland, but we have also a more recent second office in Stockholm, Sweden. We are currently approximately 380 employees from over 30 nationalities, kind of split between the Finland and Espoo offices. And let's next take a look at some of the games that we have developed. So it all started with Death Rally almost 30 years ago, but as you may know, we are most known for our narrative-driven action games, such as Max Payne and Control, and obviously Alan Wake. And most recently, released Alan Wake 2 just last October. And let's next take a quick look at a quick video of that near 30-year history. So that was a quick look into our history, so we could next discuss what Remedy is today. So Remedy is a multi-project organization with quite a few interesting projects going on. First of all, we're working on Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes with Rockstar. We have 2 games coming up in the Control franchise, Condor and Control 2. We also have Kestrel, which is more of a co-op multiplayer experience. And finally, we of course have Alan Wake 2 that we continue to support on and work DLCs on. And let's talk more about Alan Wake 2. So Alan Wake 2 is a single-player, third-person, mystery-driven survivor horror game with a unique fight with light mechanic. Alan Wake 2 was published by Epic Games and developed with Remedy's proprietary Northlight engine. And like mentioned, Alan Wake 2 was released last October and is now out on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. And in Alan Wake 2, you play as 2 heroes, Saga Anderson and Alan Wake, in a horror story that wants them dead. So Saga is an accomplished FBI agent with a reputation for solving impossible cases, who arrives to a small town of Bright Falls together with her partner Alex Casey to investigate a string of ritualistic murders. And the story of Alan follows the events from the first game. In 2010, Wake came face to face with a force of supernatural darkness. And to save his wife, he wrote an ending to his horror story that caused him to be trapped in the darkness under the lake. And this is where he spent the last 13 years trying to find a way out. And these 2 heroes explore 2 very different environments in the game. At Saga, you explore the Pacific Northwest, with its majestic landscapes, dark woods, and foggy mountains. And the Pacific Northwest region is split into 3 distinct locations. We have a quirky town of Bright Falls, a rundown city of Watery, founded by Finnish immigrants, and Cauldron Lake, a striking landmark outside Bright Falls that has been fenced off by an obscure government agency years ago. And as Alan, you explore the nightmare's dark place, under the Cauldron Lake. The Dark Place is a terrifying alternate reality that can be shaped by Alan's words and writing. As Wake used to write crime books set in New York, the Dark Place now takes a form of a twisted and nocturnal New York. And our lead environment artist, Nazar and Urbana, will be talking more about the development and environment art of the Dark Place this Friday here at GDC as well, so recommend to check that out if you're interested. And let's next take a look at the release trailer of Alan Wake 2 to give you some context of how that all looks in action.
The killer left the heart next to the body. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was a ritual. A page of text written with a typewriter. Someone's been watching us.
How do you run from an idea? From a story that lives in your head? I need to escape this nightmare.
Wake says the story will change reality around us. Why are we written into the story? I brought you the Heart Witch. Show me the terror.
Show me the terror.
So that was Alan Wake 2, released just last October. And we're very grateful of the recognition that we have been receiving, both from critics and fans alike, as well as from some of the most prestigious awards in the games industry. And lastly, just a few words of how the environment art team is set up and the responsibilities we have at Remedy. So at Remedy, the environment art team is in charge of the big picture, and we carry the responsibilities of both the level art, so set dressing, world building, environment storytelling, as well as the actual level geometry, so modular kits, terrain, architectural elements, as well as all the material work related to that. And we actually traditionally haven't had a dedicated material artist at Remedy, but currently are seeing a change in this, and we actually have just hired our first full-time material artist. So all the environment artists have needed to have quite a high level of understanding of physically based rendering as well as material creation workflows. And that's what Ben will talk more about. But for the past at least 7 years now, Substance has been in the center of our texture creation and authoring workflows. And Ben can tell much more about that.
Awesome. All right. So the idea is that we would talk a bit about environment art tech and workflows. So this is not like a specifically environment tech, but it's stuff that affects our team. But before we get into that, we'll need to clarify a couple of things that are maybe Remedy things, but anyways. So like Miro explained a little bit how environment art works at Remedy. So I might need to elaborate also what technical environment art means for us. And even though I was joking that I don't know what it means, I might have some idea. So basically, is it environment tech art? well, we don't define it that way, so word order matters for us, so But yeah, so it's environment art with a technical focus. So we combine aspects of art with tech know-how. And then as much as I appreciate all the wonderful recruiters sending me tech art positions, I probably am not good for that job. So anyway, so what do I actually do then? So this kind of stuff, R&D, benchmarks, optimization, LODs, workflows, documentation, and then guiding and teaching our art team. And then most importantly, at least I think so, is being a link between rendering and then other super techie people and the artists. So I sort of speak a bit of both. But basically, I cry to the rendering guys in a frequency that they can hear, or at least I hope so. So anyway, yeah, sorry. The whole presentation isn't gonna be my crappy jokes, but so another thing that we're gonna define is Northlight. So Northlight is basically our game engine and toolset, and it's made internally by our Northlight team and then in collaboration with all the game teams. So yeah, since we got all the explanations, or at least some of them out of the way, let's look a little bit on into our tech and workflow history. So how I'm gonna go about this is I'll briefly mention some of the tech and workflow aspects of our past projects. So I'm gonna start with Quantum Break, not only because I started then, but also we gotta start somewhere. So yeah, and if you know anything about Quantum Break, this sort of timeline is kind of funny, but anyway. So reflection-wise, we were kind of rocking screen space reflections and one cube map per level, if I remember correctly. So that was sort of basic, but we had some pretty nice GI already back then. It wasn't fully static either, so that was kind of cool. And Umbra was the middleware for occlusion culling. And then on the workflow side, was still like early PBR days, so we didn't actually have like fully PBR materials, even though our rendering was fully PBR, because we didn't just have enough reflection data. So metals, for example, would have been quite dark. So we solved that by having this kind of little bit of hybrid approach, so a little bit of PBR and then also make the scene work depending on lighting, kind of old school thing. And then we were making PBR materials with Photoshop, so that was tricky to say at least. And then up next, Crossfire, probably not that known to most people, but we did work on that as well. So this was similar to QB, Quantum Break, that it wasn't fully PBR at the start, but we improved also like a reflection model, so had more cube maps and SSR, and then also signed distance field reflections, so SDFR. So then we also moved towards like fully corrected PBR materials, and due to like the better reflections, so we could actually make metals work and so on. And initially we were using Quixel Suite, but Substance started to make more and more sense for us, so that's when we started moving towards Substance. And all of our material blending was basically just Vertex Alpha blending, so quite basic. And then, oh yeah, right, this one. So we had like a little bit of a collab with NVIDIA, which was kind of cool. Had to do it quite quickly, so it was just me and one other artist. Had like a couple of weeks to do it, so yeah, if it's not pretty, you can blame me. But yeah, was a nice little detour from Crossfire, so that was fun for me at least. And we used Substance and mid-poly workflows because we just didn't have time to bake anything and so on. So, and then we also wanted to have like nice reflections. So the more geo you had, the prettier it looked. So we could have like these really nice close-up shots. But then we actually shipped ray tracing in proper product. So that was Control. And then we also had like, as backups, we had the SDFR and the screen space reflections and QMax even, but that was like for the lower end systems. So ray tracing worked quite well there already. And then, of course, like the destructible environments was like a big part of that. And now we had also moved to fully embracing Substance, so we were part of the cult. Yeah, and also if you've seen Miro's talk he had back a couple of years ago, few years ago already,
yeah.
he had like done made most of the material like procedurally in Designer, so that was pretty cool. And then we worked on another Crossfire episode, and this was basically same engine as Control, so we didn't do a lot of changes, of course, like first-person characters visible in ray tracing reflections was caused a little bit of funny stuff, but yeah, we managed to get it working also. And then workflow-wise, we deviated a little bit, like we started to use more and more scan data, but it wasn't like fully established pipeline, so it was a bit like dabbling with scans. And then we're finally looking at Alan. So have we actually come up with anything cool since Control? Well, I sure hope so, because that's what I'm mostly going to talk about. So this is like, I know the text is kind of small, but like basically we've had quite a lot of improvements, and I can't go through them all, but basically like these are some of the things that mostly affect environment art or affect us a lot. And the idea is that I'm going to talk about the background of this like related tech, and then also about the workflows, and then how it was developed for Alan Wake 2 and how that affected our workflows as well. So first of all, let's start with like a little bit of occlusion culling and geometry and so on. So back in Control, we had like quite a lot of like these occlusion culling bugs, and this of course was like a pretty obvious example, but there were trickier situations that needed to be fixed. And then when it actually did work, there was like a lot of stuff that was rendered completely unnecessarily because, yeah, it wasn't that accurate. So there's like a lot of stuff that doesn't contribute into shadow passes or, you know, needed to be rendered at all, but they were still rendered. So looking at the geometry detail, for example, here's our FPS game Crossfire, like this asset, so like a fireplace. So Control would have had even less detail than this due to being third person. So this is the level for Alan Wake 2. So it has like way more geo than Crossfire despite being third person. So how did we achieve this? One of the main aspects is like GPU driven rendering. And I'm not going to get into too much nerdy stuff about this, but basically a lot more happens on the GPU, so you can push a lot more like through it. So like stuff like draw calls and poly budget per object, this kind of stuff like sort of went out the window, not completely, but we kind of had to reevaluate. So for example here, this is just like a scene from the game, from Alan Wake 2. And I freeze the rendering here, and basically Saga's feet are cold, and everything behind her is cold, and even the top of the trees are cold. So how does that work? Well, it's called meshlets, so everything is divided into these sort of things. And the artists themselves don't need to do it, it's like done automatically. And the old wisdom of like having, you know, a corner of a large asset being visible, meaning that it renders the whole thing, doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, so you can call all of these separate pieces. So beauty render and then the meshlet visualization. So we had a way more geo than we used to have in previous projects. And initially, or well, to be honest, like the whole project, we had a little bit of difficulty to know what the appropriate limits to the details were on the geo, because even like our rendering wizards weren't really sure, because yeah, new tech, so we kind of tried to push a lot of stuff through. So just to put it into perspective a little bit, like we had 2 million per frame in like polys around there in Control. So Alan Wake 2 had around like 15 to 16 million per frame. including then like shadow paths and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. Like if you're interested, unfortunately it's not on GDC, but Eric Jamson is going to have a GPU-driven rendering with mesh shaders in Alan Wake 2 at Digital Dragons. So apart from having like more geo on the actual meshes, we also needed to put a lot more meshes in, so especially like for like organic scenes. So Cauldron Lake and Bright Falls and Water and those nature scenes needed a lot of like foliage and so on. But also like NASA is gonna talk about that on Friday, but the Dark Place also used like a lot of scattering of objects. So we developed this kind of scattering volumes, and then they were just basically, yeah, scattering meshes, and was based on noise textures and painted textures, or both. And here's like a quick example of the painting functionality. So, and obviously not final tree meshes, if you didn't notice. Yeah. So anyway, most of the time, like you could scatter like large meshes as well, but like we use this for like grass and stuff. So like, you know, this kind of stuff. All right. So up next then, like we had like a lot of geo, and we also needed to like figure out like our baking workflows, because, well, yeah, I'm just gonna use this mesh, random mesh, but anyway, this is just like a benchmark thing that I made as an example during Alan Wake 2 development. So in the past, we were like having a bit of issues with like our custom normal tangent space. So we had our own thing, and it was quite confusing to artists because the only thing that worked was X-normal. And also, to be honest, with custom plugins. So not exactly ideal, especially when you have like artists that are not that technically inclined necessarily. So after some research, we figured out that, well, maybe it's obvious to everyone else, but like MIG-T space per pixel or per fragment worked pretty much with all of these. And since we were also moving to Substance fully, made sense to use Substance for baking instead of X-normal. All right, so then like a little bit of like, I talked about reflection models getting better also in the previous projects, and the same thing has been the case for Alan Wake 2 as well. So the ray tracing was like first time shipped in Control, but we improved on that as well. So this is, sorry for the crappy looking debug thing, but this is like just my test thing. So this is like the old ray tracing, and then it switches to the path traced version. So you get actual like reflections of reflections and that kind of stuff. Yo, dog. But anyway, so since like the reflections improved a lot, it was also really important for us to have like even more accurate like materials. And our previous implementation of PBR checks was quite inaccurate, and it was quite confusing to artists. So basically, they had no idea how far off their materials were, and they basically just like, you know, increase the value until it no longer clips. So that's like a debug view from our engine before. Or then if it was too bright, they just like, you know, darken it. So that led to like a lot of like murky or muddy looking materials, which is not great. So this sort of stuff, like you had these ends and like, what the heck, like it's hard to tell what's going on. So it doesn't really teach the artist to think at all. And also a lot of times we had like the limit for the red zone was quite strict. So there could be like materials that were fine inside this, but yeah, artists were just taught that like, yeah, you can't go there, so just avoid it. And then the checks weren't also like taking into account like metals and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I remade like a bunch of our swatches, so this is not like innovative in any case, and thanks to Unity and their development also, or like research, we also like implemented newer swatches that are a little bit darker than charcoal because you have like synthetic materials and so on. So these were made for artists to like understand better like where you could go. So synthetic materials could sometimes be darker than charcoal and so on. And then the same thing for specular sets. And another thing then, once like I started updating the swatches, I also tried to like improve on our PBR checker so that like it would make more sense to artists and tell you a little bit like how far off to the edges. I know you can't read the small text, it's on purpose, like this is like just, you know, to show, you can look at the gradient, but basically the dark materials weren't only like forbidden and okay, there were like some nuances. So it helped to teach the artist to read this stuff. And then it also took metals into account, so sometimes you have dark diffuse values, which is perfectly fine when you have metals. So yeah, our previous ranges were based on Lagarde's and Arduin's work from Remember Me days, but yeah, due to some like further research by other people, we haven't done this ourselves, but I just assembled it. So try to guide our artist a bit more. And then, I don't know why, but like a lot of checkers also seem to have luminosity compensation, so like perceived brightness, which doesn't make sense to us. And like, if you disagree, like, feel free to prove me wrong. But anyway, we went with like the like equally weighted like grayscale. So anyway. And then the same for specular albedo checks. So ranges are different, but logic is the same. And this is like the setup in Designer. So yeah, it's not super complicated. Even I could do it, so, you know. And it's not super strict either because there's a lot of transitional values between metals and the dielectrics. So, you know, it doesn't make sense to be like super strict because then you're gonna have like false positives and so on. So chess table again, this is like my favorite example asset, so advertising my own stuff. Yeah, so this is just to show like how it's wrong. So I had to break this a little bit. So looking at the debug, you have this kind of stuff. So red means too dark, blue too bright, and green is fine, surprise. And then the pink or whatever is like metals that have the diffuse that's too bright. And yeah, so they all have gradients just to make it like more obvious, like how far off. So if you had something that was yellow, for example, we told our artists that like they could be fine, but you would just need to like think about it. That does it make sense? So yeah, this is just like an example of the workflow, like how you could make stuff correctly. So like brightening some stuff, then darkening the diffuse of the metal because it was too bright, and so on. And we want the artist also to fix the stuff from bottom to top, because if you start at the top and you just put like levels on it, you're like basically gonna lose contrast and then make worse looking materials. So start with the stuff that's wrong at the bottom. And then, yeah, what it should look like after fixing it. And here's an example of the actual in-game. So I made this goth manner thing just to show like how far off it is. And then like in engine, the PBR checker there and how you can fix it. And this was just a diffuse albedo multiplier, so you could just like raise it and then it fixed it by that. So yeah, like looking at Alan Wake 2, I think like the artist did a fantastic job with the material work. And obviously it's not thanks to me, because I didn't actually make most of the stuff, but maybe it helped a little bit, I hope. So yeah, another thing that was important in the texturing thing was like material layering. So in the past, we just had this simple stuff that I mentioned, so like vertex alpha blends, 2 materials per material ID, and then vertex RGB was just used for tinting, so very simple. And it worked quite well for control, but you know, it was quite limiting for the organic approach of Alan Wake 2. So we moved to this sort of system where it's like layered materials, so you could layer a bunch of them on top of each other. And technically you could add 60 materials, but we usually aim for a lot less just because of, you know, you don't want to make the rendering guys angry. And yeah, like all the characters and meshes and terrain and all that used the same material setup, so that was quite useful. All right, so yeah, in addition to the like, wait, it skipped now, I think. This is lacking. No, okay, sorry. Yeah, so hand-painted masks, and then in addition to the hand-painted masks, we also had like the height maps included, like affecting that result. And then it also affected like the tessellation of the terrain itself. So we had like a separate terrain system that had like a tessellation. The actual meshes didn't have the tessellation, but used the same materials. So if you put the same material on a terrain, it would have tessellation. And we concluded that like the height ranges of like 16 centimeters would be enough, even if we had like, yeah, like if we didn't use high bit depth images. So it was like enough detail for us. And then we used Substance to verify that like the height maps were correct and the scan content worked and so on. And then if we needed to adjust something, we did that in Substance. And then we verified it in the game engine. So yeah, then height field tessellation, we had like this sort of stuff, so of course it adds more detail, which is quite cool. So yeah, then in addition to that, we also had like a terrain system. So yeah, initially this is like a debug thing, but yeah, this used 16-bit EXR files, so we needed, of course, like a little bit more than 16 centimeters for this. And then we used the layered materials in combination with that, and then meshes, foliage, and so on. But you get the idea. And you could paint that in the editor as well, but we used Gaia and Houdini as a base. And here's like a quick overview of how that worked in the editor. So you could paint materials and then also like sculpt. So yeah, quite like familiar to most people. And here's like a quick example of like the different aspects that I mentioned earlier. So all the scattering, tessellation, height field stuff, and so on. So this is like without any tessellation or scattered foliage trees. Then the tessellation, so this sort of stuff adds a bit of depth, and then scattered foliage on top, and then the final trees. So yeah, it's quite a big difference. And then everything put together, you get this sort of stuff when you have good artists like NASA, for example. Yeah, so we looked at the past and Alan Wake 2, so do we have anything planned for the future? Maybe. So yeah, like Alan Wake 2 was developed with our old editor, and also Condor is using that. But our upcoming projects like Control 2 and Max Payne remakes, they are gonna use USD and our new editor. And unfortunately, I can't share much about that because, yeah, you know how it is. But if you're interested in like our editor and like our new pipelines, you should go check Vesa Paakkanen's Building Game Worlds with OpenUSD or Sebastian Eriksson's real-time world editing technology in Northlight. I don't remember the days, but you can find them. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, before wrapping up, we also want to send some regards and thanks to the whole development team of Alan Wake 2, as well as our external partners that made the game happen. Wasn't always easy, but you really made something special. And also wish to send some special thanks to our art director, Janne Pulkkinen, Nazaren Urbano, the lead environment artist on Alan Wake 2, Tatu Aalto, our lead graphics programmer, Erik Jansson, our senior graphics programmer, and finally Damien Stevnieski, the lead lighting artist on Alan Wake 2. And your hard work and determination really made the environments of Alan Wake 2 shine. So thank you for that. We are also hiring, so we are looking for more environment artists to join our team, and we also have multiple other open positions available at our careers page, so remedygames.com/careers, so recommend to checking it out. Thank you. Any questions?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
I have a question. I'm just curious what the workflow might be to interface with sound designers for environments. It's a big part of your environments, the sound, I would think.
So the question was...
Does that fall into your purview ever?
So the question was, how do we work with sound designers?
That's correct.
That's correct. So
That was a basic version of what I asked.
yeah, so of course we work relatively close to our sound designers as we environment artists set up a lot of our physics materials that of course define the audio response of the surfaces. So we work quite closely, kind of iterating on those, kind of what works, what doesn't work, and it's basically an ongoing process.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm over here on the right. You're looking the wrong way. Over here.
All right.
All right.
Jag hörde ingenting.
Cool. Any more questions?
Hey, yeah, I had a question over here. One of the things that really stood out about Alan Wake 2 was there's lots of really fantastic post-processing effects that happen. For example, the one that really stands out is in the overlaps, you'll see visions of the other characters' overlaps. So when you're in the Cauldron Lake Forest, you see Caldera Strait Station. Maybe this is not in your purview, but if you have any information about how that was achieved, it would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's like basically projected on top. So it's, projected like video textures on top of that environment. So
I see.
Yeah, the whole double exposure workflow, we're going to start that quite early, used it on Control as well, so it's kind of something that is an ongoing Remedy thing as well. Unfortunately, don't really have much to share from our side, as it's mainly set up by the VFX and lighting departments.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you.
thanks.
Hi. I have a question. How do you control 3D artists? Do you have any step in your pipeline to validate these PBR values? You trust them to check them for themselves, or you have a person who just doing the check-in engine or substance?
Well, we try to train our people, so that's why remade the PBR checker so it would be clearer for the artists. But then we also tend to have the leads and me and Miro also sometimes go through the materials just to verify that we have correct stuff.
Okay, so they are responsible. It's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I was wondering, how flexible is the environment artwork for level design changes? If you're halfway through or maybe almost done with environment art, but you realize for design reasons you want to change level design, is that easy or hard to accommodate?
Yeah, so the question was about the work we do with level design and any potential changes there that might be. Okay, so we generally work in kind of these pods or strike team structure. So the level designers and environment artists usually sit in the same room or work very closely on the locations we do in the games. So of course, ideally there wouldn't be a lot of changes late in production, but those occasionally happen. And
Never.
but it is a bit of a back and forth discussion what can be done with the time we have and so on. So it's the teams together making those decisions with, of course, the leads and directors supporting those decisions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
When you guys are talking about layered materials, it seems to me that you're basically doing traditional PBR materials, but then you're just using a height lerp to blend between A and B. Is that it, or are you guys doing something like what Epic is doing with like Substrate, where it's like a completely different way of thinking about materials entirely?
Well, it's like each are like they're separate materials that are masked based on the height and the masks. So yeah, it's just like you have more flexibility, but they're each like their own material asset. So you can, for example, like change the instance parameters of the materials themselves, and they will translate over to the other layered materials that are using that material. So, but yeah, it's nothing like super revolutionary there. Just made our workflows a lot easier than just having two materials that we did in the past.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Sure.
Hello. Hi. It's very impressed. I'm very impressed to see like how the technology evolved in the environmental art and Remedy Entertainment. And I just noticed you mentioned like in the terrain you made by both like Gaia and also Houdini. I'm just curious to know like what part you created in Gaia, and then what the assets or like how the asset you populate like with Houdini. How the mix, like how you use. Thank you.
Yeah, like the Houdini generation was like the most basic, I think, like part of it, and then like Gaia was used to like all the erosion and that kind of stuff and getting the different masks out of there. But that actually is not like, I'm not super like expert on that field. So, but yeah, that's basically it.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. All right.
So when it comes to assets and static meshes and retexturing, when it comes to like stuff like Control and Control 2, do you guys reuse the static meshes and some of the static meshes and retexture them and revamp them for the sequel, or does it start from scratch for everything?
So the question was about asset reuse between the projects, like Control and Control 2 as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course there's already been like a console generation change between the first Control and now Control 2 that's in development. So of course most likely need to update a lot of the content to kind of match these new kind of render pipelines and everything that we have now available. So using the new systems we have basically.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Oh, hello. I was just wondering.
Could you guys, by the way, could you wave so we're looking at the right?
Okay. Over here.
Okay, thanks.
So I was just wondering, every time I hear tech art, I think, oh, I also need to know programming. And I guess I'm asking generally is, how important is a programming background if you want to be a tech artist?
Well, that's the thing that I tried to explain is that, like, I'm not a tech artist.
Oh, right.
So I know a little bit of programming, but very basic.
Yeah.
But I'm more of like, you know, like the workflows and how to create stuff. So I know a lot about PBR, baking, all that stuff, like tangent spaces and these kind of things. But I'm not an expert on like actual making tooling. So I'm just helping to design, for example, like what we need. But then like for us, at least, tech artists are usually responsible then for like implementing those requests into tooling. But each company, I think, defines it a little bit differently. And like at Remedy, we define it kind of like this, at the moment at least. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So it's-
sorry, maybe that didn't answer anything, but
But the way you see it, it's like just general pipeline development, I guess?
yeah, we actually like call it pipeline now, like the tech artist sort of pipeline. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. But yeah, like if you are interested in the other aspects of it and don't know programming, I think like it's perfectly possible to have a position like I do, for example. So it depends on the company, I think. Maybe I won't get a job anywhere else. Could be. I don't know.
All right, cool, thanks.
Sure.
We have time for maybe one more question. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Sure.
I want to ask, like, how many environment artists we have in the team?
Currently, the environment art team we have at Remedy is around 25 artists.
Okay. I have another question, which is a bit of a complex because I'm a senior environment artist. And my question is, sometime the environment artist also gonna face some like perf issue, like we need to take care about, is that expensive to render? I just want to know when we are start our progress about, to improve the perf, because my last two job, we are noticed that at the last, few months. So that's a very hard for us to fix the perf issue because we need to delay or remove a lot of things. So I just want to know how your team's doing this.
I could basically say that kind of how we have structured the setup is that the environment art team is the kind of first line of defense. So a lot of the environment artists do performance review constantly as they work, kind of checking the poly count numbers and everything, kind of texture memory and everything that kind of goes into it. So generally we are the first line of defense to make sure that it doesn't go bad, but of course then we have technical artists and designers to kind of also take a look into it early on to make sure that the plans we have are kind of sensible and we can actually ship the game.
But with the new GPU-driven pipeline, it was like harder for us to guide our artists also, so we kind of had to figure out how to, like, we did have to optimize also later on, but yeah. Like Miro said, it's at least like we need to have some sort of like sensibility into our content, so we don't go like all crazy and use 8K maps everywhere or whatever, which has happened though. But
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.